this video, I'm going to do an example of solving a nonlinear system by substitution. And over here I've written down some of the steps we use when solving a nonlinear system by substitution. So our first step is going to be to solve one of the equations for one of the variables, and then substitute what that equation is equal to into the other equation. So looking at example 1 here, I have x squared plus x minus y equals -1. And then my second equation is x plus y equals 4. Now, when using substitution, we usually want to solve the easier of the two, or the more simplistic equations. So in this case, I'm going to solve equation 2. So if I want to solve equation 2, I'll also want to take note of the equation 1 and which variable I want to solve for. So if I look at equation 1, I notice that there's only one y when there's two x's. So in that case, I want to solve this second equation for the y variable. And I can do that simply by just subtracting x from both sides. So the second equation can be rewritten as y equals 4 minus x. Now, the reason why I want to solve this second equation again is so that I can take what it's equal to and substitute that into the first equation for that variable. So I can now rewrite equation 1 as x squared plus x minus, and instead of writing minus y, I'm going to put parentheses because I'm making a substitution, and then I'm going to substitute what y is equal to instead of writing y. So I'm going to write 4 minus x. And then this whole equation is still going to be equal to the -1. Now, once I've made the substitution, the problem really just becomes simplifying and then solving. So if you recall, anytime you have a negative next to the parentheses, that really means you have to distribute the negative to both terms inside the parentheses. So this +4 will end up becoming a -4, and then this -x will end up becoming a +x. The negative really just switches the two signs, and then this is still equal to -1. Now at this point, I still need to do a little bit more simplifying. So for instance, if you notice, I have two x terms, so I can combine those. So I can rewrite this as x squared plus 2x minus 4 equals -1. And now I'm kind of ready to solve. The first step in solving is always to get everything to one side of the equation. So I'm going to add 1, and so I'll get x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals 0. And then at this point in the problem, you'll notice that I now have a quadratic, and the quadratic's in standard form. Anytime I have a quadratic equation in standard form, I want to solve it by factoring. So I can write out my two parentheses, and this is sort of like undoing FOIL. So what times what will give me the first term? Well, that's just going to be x times x. And then I got to think about what times what will give me the last term. Well, that's going to be 3 and 1. And then I need the last two numbers to add to the middle term. Well, in this case, I need it to be a +2. So my 3's got to be positive, and my 1's got to be a negative. So I can now factor that into x plus 3 times x minus 1 equals 0. And once you get the two parentheses being multiplied together and they equal 0, you can simply just rewrite this as two separate equations. So x plus 3 equals 0 and x minus 1 equals 0. And now if I solve both of those equations, on the left hand side I'll minus 3 from both sides. I'll get x equals -3. Or if I solve the right hand equation, I'll get x equals +1. Now I'm not quite done yet because I only have x values. I know normally we're used to just x values being our solution, but anytime we're working with a problem that is a system that has two variables, x and y, our solutions will always be points. So one thing to note about systems is the solutions to a system will always be a point. So you're going to have an x and a y value, and sometimes you can have multiple solutions. So you might have multiple points that are solutions. So for instance, so far I've found two x values. I need to find two y values that go with both of these x values. And to do that, I can really come back up to what y is equal to. Y is equal to 4 minus x. So I can just substitute my x values I found back into this equation. So for instance, I have an x of -3. If I plug a -3 into this equation, I'll get, and I'll write it up over here, but I'll get y equals 4 minus a -3. And anytime I subtract a negative, that's really like adding a positive, so I get y equals 7. So when I plug -3 in, I get y is 7. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the 1. So if I come up and plug the 1 into the equation, well, that's just going to give me y equals 4 minus 1, or y equals 3. So when I plug an x value of 1 in, I get a y of 3. And then lastly, like I was saying before, usually the solution to a system is a point, so we can write these in point form. The x will come first, the y will come second, and then the other one as well. The x will come first, the y will come second. So the solutions to the systems are the points -3, 7 and the point 1, 3.